I remember when I first started to consider doing a podcast, and I quickly dismissed the thought because I thought to myself, it's going to be way too much tech. It's going to be hard. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be like way too difficult, and there's no way that I can do it. But I want you to know that wasn't true. Have you heard about Anchor by Spotify? Actually, you kind of have because you are listening to my podcast right now, which is an Anchor podcast. Anchor is literally the easiest way to make a podcast. Everything you need is all in one place, and it's absolutely free. So, Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from either your phone or your computer. When you host on Anchor, it's super easy to distribute because they distribute for you, basically. They push it out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a lot more platforms. And it literally is everything that you need to make your podcast all in one place. I couldn't believe that it was free when I found out about it, but it absolutely is. So if that's something that you've been thinking about, if you want to start your own podcast, if you've had an idea rolling around in your brain, now is the time. All you have to do is download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey there, I'm Julie, and this is the Married to Addiction podcast. If you're here, then you're probably what I call my secret sister. We're in a situation we never asked to be in and fighting a battle we never wanted to fight. We're faith-filled women who are married to an alcoholic, and it affects every inch of our lives. If that sounds like you, then this is a safe place for you to land. Married to Addiction is a faith-based podcast where I help you find the tools and strength you need to navigate your husband's addiction without losing yourself in the process. So please subscribe and tune in as often as you can, because your husband's recovery is important, but so is yours. You guys, did you hear my announcement last week about the promotion that I'm doing right now for joining the Secret Sister Circle? I wanted to make sure that I talked about it today because you only have one more week to get in on this. I haven't done this in 5 months. I probably won't for quite some time. Maybe never again. I'm not real sure yet. But what I'm doing right now is if you join the Secret Sister Circle in the month of September and you remain a member for at least 2 months, you also get my 30-day online program absolutely free at the end of your second month. So if you have ever considered joining the Secret Sister Circle, now is the time, and you only have a few more days. So please, right now, while you're thinking about it, if this is speaking to you, go to my website, marriedtoaddiction.com, and look for the drop down that says Get Help, and you will see the information for the Secret Sister Circle. Hop in right now and get that program absolutely free. I can't wait to welcome you in. Hello, and welcome to episode 56 of the Married to Addiction podcast. I've been kind of putting off this week's podcast because I have a bit of a cold and I've been very sneezy and very sniffly. You can probably hear it in my voice, but it's Thursday, so I wanted to go ahead and get one recorded for this week. So hopefully there won't be too many sneezy or sniffly interruptions. Today's episode is called A Spirit of Bondage and Torment. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode when we talked about the questions to ask yourself right now. One of them was, are you untying from your husband's addiction? And so we had already touched on that last time. So let's start with talking about untying, because that's going to lead into how it relates to a spirit of bondage and torment. So in most circles, you will hear untying called detaching. I'm sure you've heard of detaching with love. That is an Al-Anon term, and just detaching in general. But when I started Married to Addiction, I really just felt led to call it untying. And when I started thinking about that, I thought, that's to me is a better visualization, because I do think that when you say detach, that you should detach. Detaching can sometimes be misconstrued as that you're detaching from the person. And sometimes if we look at it that way, when we start detaching in our minds and sometimes even in our hearts, we can become cold toward that person. Cold feelings can develop. Even callousness can begin to creep in. Indifference to that person in general, your feelings can be affected. So I like the word untying. That seems to me to be a better word, because what we're really trying to do is untie ourselves from the addiction, and being addicted to the addiction and obsessing over the addiction. We're not wanting to untie ourselves from the person, it's the addiction itself. Being tied to the addiction is exactly what keeps us in a spirit of bondage and torment. And when I look back at what my life looked like when my husband was really addicted, I was 100% in a spirit of bondage and torment. I was constantly tormented by, is he drinking? How much has he been drinking? What's he doing? Where is he? I mean, just constantly, which kept me in that spirit of bondage because it ruled my life. It ruled my thought life. It ruled my spiritual life. It started to affect my physical life. I was totally in bondage to that addiction. The enemy loves addiction because he gets to do exactly that. He's not only taking down the addicted person, but he's taking down the people around them as well, especially the wife. We are the ones who I feel like are really at the most risk of being bound by this and being in a spirit of bondage and torment. So even though bondage and torment are usually thought of as problems of the addicted, I mean, you think of an addict and yes, they're in bondage to their substance. They're being tormented by it because it's destroying their life and they can't get out from under it a lot of times. But honestly, they are our problems too, because that is what the enemy uses also to bring us down and to keep us down. So let's talk for a second about what bondage and torment are. So torment is defined as severe physical or mental suffering. Are you experiencing mental suffering? I know I sure was. I suffered mentally a great deal. Like I said, I was constantly preoccupied with what my husband was doing or not doing, or how much he'd been drinking, or I was looking for bottles, or I was driving around trying to find him. Just constantly in a state of mental suffering, which of course did lead to, physical issues and all types of things. But basically, torment can manifest as that anxiety. Just you're in a constant state of anxiety. You're in a constant state of fear. You're in a constant state of hopelessness because you feel like no matter what you're doing, it's not making any sort of a difference. That is being tormented. You are being tormented by that. Spiritual bondage is any area of our lives where we basically are coming into agreement with a lie from the enemy. In our heads, this sounds like, this is never going to end. God has left you. He's not here for you. He's not going to help your husband. He's not going to help you. Your husband's never going to get sober. You're going to end up being divorced. Your children are being affected by this. Addiction is now just your life. This is your future. There's no hope. We inadvertently and subconsciously and, oftentimes unexpectedly end up coming into this agreement with the enemy. We are in agreement with the lies that he's telling us, which is why we start taking those actions, like searching for things, like following him or trying to track him, all of those things. It all comes from being in agreement with that lie that the enemy is telling us, or multiple lies that the enemy is telling us. And that, my friends, is spiritual bondage. This will prevent you from moving forward in any way, shape, or form. So what do we do? If you are experiencing these things, which you most likely are as the wife of an alcoholic, what can you do? How can you get out from under a spirit of bondage and torment? Well, we talked about, untying, which is important, but also one of the biggest ways to get out from under this is, instead of being in agreement with a lie from the enemy, be in the Word. Spend time with God each and every day. And I know sometimes when we're in this place, that doesn't sound really attractive because we feel like God's not really there for us right now. I remember feeling that exact way. But the fact of the matter is he is still there with you, 100%. A way to tap into that and just begin to see that and to begin to feel that is to spend time with God daily. Be in the Word, pray. Talk to him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him you have doubts. Tell him you have fears. Tell him, even if you have anger, express that. But just spend time with him daily. Let that take the place of being in agreement with the lies from the enemy. You can also, once you start doing that, you can begin to refute your fears with God's word. There are so many Bible verses about fear and how it's a liar and how we're not supposed to live in a state of fear. And once you are in the word and really being intentional about that, you will start to see that you will be shown verses about fear. Write them down. Find a picture of whatever verse it is that speaks to you, as an image on your phone, and screen cap it. And then, you can put it as a screensaver on your phone. Just make sure that you have those things readily available so that when you do start having those feelings, you can refute those with the word of God. It can be so powerful. And then the third thing that is so important is you really need to consistently work on changing behaviors that are keeping you bound. So this is where the whole works and faith comes in. So yes, we need to have faith that God's doing his part, but what is our part? Our part is to recognize the things that we're doing that are keeping us bound. Those things I mentioned earlier, the searching, the following, the obsessing, the tracking, like the confronting, the fighting, like all of those things are keeping you stuck and keeping you bound. So what can you do to change those behaviors before they even start? When you feel yourself wanting to go down that road, what can you do to choose another path? When you start consistently working on changing those behaviors, you will notice that spirit of bondage and torment begins to change and begins to lift because you are doing your part to not participate in that and to not be in agreement with those lies from the enemy. If you keep doing the same things, you will stay in the same place. So if you don't want to live in a spirit of bondage and torment anymore, you got to change some things. You have to. The things that we talked about, being in the Word, spending time with God. If you want more direction with how to change those behaviors, because those can be really hard to get free from, especially if you've been doing them for a while, everything in you tells you to continue those behaviors because you are in a state of desperation and you just want this to be over so badly. So if you are having trouble with, or if you can foresee that you will have trouble with changing those behaviors, that's what the Secret Sister Circle is for. And I would love to welcome you in there. That's exactly the type of things that we work on, getting free from this, getting free from a spirit of bondage and torment, because you are not made to live like this. I hope that's been helpful for you. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Quick question for you before I let you go today. Have you been to the Married to Addiction website? If you haven't, I would love if you would go pay it a visit. It's just marriedtoaddiction.com. And over there, you can see just a lot of different information about my podcast. There is a blog on there. There's some free resources for you. And there's also a few ways that you can actually get some help if you need a little more help and direction and support as you travel this difficult path with your addicted husband. So if you haven't yet, please go visit marriedtoaddiction.com. Thanks so much.